Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the After Hours. And Nintendo, I don't know what you're doing. I don't know what's going on with you. It's probably greed, but $500. I know it says 450 MSRP, but let's be honest. You're gonna have to buy software with that hardware, and that's gonna put you over $500. Especially with games, the games prices, which I do want to talk about a little. And honestly, it's just unbelievable. It's unbelievable. I remember when, being behind the curb meant that Nintendo always kind of tried to sell their things for a much better price. The Wii, it was an underpowered thing, but it was relatively cheap, and because of that, so many people got access to it. It was a nice casual console, and Nintendo never having competition because it never really competed was always kind of nice because it meant that they could innovate without needing to copy the other guy, right? While Sony and Microsoft back in the day, they just tried to get their hand in the pot for the Wii and try to copy the motion controls. And then the Wii U came out, and again, Nintendo wasn't trying to compete, but I think with the Switch, it kind of proved that that was actually a good strategy. I think the Wii U was just kind of like this transitionary period where they weren't really sure about where to take the console. The Wii U gamepad was kind of fun, but obviously the Switch's execution with the whole playing anywhere was so much better, even if it meant downgraded graphics, lowered hardware, less features just because of the kind of hardware that it had. So totally understandable, but of course the Switch was a complete success, and now we're on the Switch 2, and now everybody's talking about the prices, right? So what happened? Why is Nintendo seeing themselves be more greedy, kind of like Sony and Xbox to some extent? The prices are kind of ridiculous. It really does feel like Nintendo failed to read the room. Right now, we're all kind of going through a lot of economical troubles, especially around the world, just because of like how the economy is. And I don't want to get into that stuff right now. Just know that it's like read the room, man. You could have just looked around and seen, oh hey, everybody's kind of struggling. You know what? Maybe we can take a loss on the console. Kind of like what the PlayStation did, they took a loss on the console just so that they could have the install base necessary in order to, have a good player base and have people be able to buy the games, right? Because otherwise, without the console, then you don't have a console to play the games and nobody's going to buy the game. So it's better to just have the install base be a much bigger, at least at a bigger loss. Because then, they always take their cut for the software too. And so for Nintendo, one thing that could have just made this, a sweep in the competition, right, in the console space, would have been to just not charge as much as they did now. And it's crazy thinking about that, right? Especially with competitors like the Steam Deck and other PC handhelds that are doing their best to try to make their experiences as streamlined as possible. Because that's one thing that consoles do have an advantage over, right? It's that streamlined process. If you just want to play a game, just play a game, right? Which even Nintendo is trying to hinder now, but we'll get to that later. And the Steam Deck is just cheaper, and you get so much more. And there's a lot of discussions about what Nintendo offers and stuff. And you know what? Those are fair, right? Nintendo offers a lot of things. It's basically the same argument as Apple, right? The whole walled off garden, the guaranteed experience and all that stuff, and it's so easy to use, all that crap, right? But the difference is, right, is that, Nintendo is just about making games, right? We don't need all these extra peripheral stuffs, and that's usually what most people kind of point out with the Direct, in that nobody wants to use the cameras, nobody wants to use the voice chat feature and all that stuff. Like they treat it as something revolutionary when it's really not, right? What iPhones have compared to a Switch is it's incomparable, right? Because the iPhone is pretty much for everything, right? Almost everything that you use in your daily life, and it can be justified for having it, right? With the Switch too, I mean, how long before those cameras and peripherals and that software starts collecting dust, right? Kind of like the Labo, right? The Labo, that was a one season thing, and you know what? It was fun. It was a nice little gimmick, but you know what? Let's be honest. It was a $60 piece of cardboard. It's neat. It was a nice little engineering concept, but ultimately, I don't think it moved mountains as people made it out to seem back when it was launched. But really, the main point of contention, right? The main point that kind of pisses me off is with all the defenders of the prices, right? Let's get into the prices. $80 for a game, $500 for a console, and I know the console isn't $500 MSRP. You know, it's closer to $400, but if you're gonna have to buy an $80 game in order to use it, well then yeah, it's $500. So what's the big issue here? There's really no big issue with the price itself, other than most people aren't going to buy it. What I mean is that, you know, Nintendo sets the price themselves, and if people are going to buy it, people are going to buy it. If people aren't going to buy it, people aren't going to buy it. More than likely, people are not going to buy it. But what pisses me off is all the fucking white knights for Nintendo online, dude. And I am making the big mistake of listening to any and all comments on the internet about this kind of stuff, and you know, because who knows how much of that is just engagement farm, right? How much of that are just bots that are making up all these inflammatory posts just to piss me off, right? Not me specifically, obviously, but man, it's crazy how much the dead internet theory is becoming reality. The worst part, right, is that there are some genuine people who actually defend Nintendo, and it always happens, right? This is why I can say for certain that there are people that exist, because no matter what, right, it always happens whenever prices, you know, go up. This also happened with Sony when they put their games at $70 instead of $60, right? Right. The point isn't, you know, about inflation. You know, the point isn't that we don't have more money. Yeah, technically, some people have more money now than ever before, right? You know, we've heard those statistics. You know, we've seen that, yeah, you know, people earn more money than before, quote unquote, because technically inflation makes games cost less if it stays the same price, right? $60 isn't the same as $60 back in the day. Fucking whatever, right? Like, yeah, but that's not the point. That's not the point. The thing is, right, is that as a customer, you have the right and the responsibility to demand for lower prices. Like that's it. That's it. If you want to pay $60 for something and you want to say, hey, I don't think this is worth $80, or I think it's a little bit rude or tone deaf. Like, I want to make my opinion heard that $80 is too much, that $450 is too much for this kind of product. I'd rather pay $60. I'd rather pay $30, right? Then we have the right to make our opinion heard, and not to have some jackass on the internet think, oh, actually, inflation, games are supposed to be this. Games aren't supposed to be any price. It's supposed to be what they're worth, or what we feel comfortable paying for it, right? Like, we as a customer have the right to do so. We have the right and honestly the responsibility to do so, because at the end of the day, that money that we make working, hourly pay, hourly rate, what that money represents is our sweat, tears, and blood. Our time that we're never gonna get back. Our time that is long gone and is now in monetary form, right? If we want to say, hey, you know, a game isn't worth that much, we have the right to do so. If we say that a console isn't worth that much, we have the right to say so. Statistics and numbers be damned. And it's not even like Nintendo wouldn't make a profit with $60, dude. You know, most of their first party lineup games sell at least 10 million copies worldwide, all right? 10 million. If they sold the game at $30 and sold 10 million units worldwide, right? That's $300 million. You're telling me that Nintendo doesn't make profit with $300 million on one game. And when it comes to consoles, well, profit doesn't matter because they're not making their money off of consoles. They're making money off of software licenses. And selling this console for that much price is not only going to alienate so many people, but it's also double dipping. That's what that is, honestly. It's double dipping. They're trying to make money not only off of their software licenses, which they're going to make so much fucking money off of that. It's almost unbelievable how much they're going to make money off of that. And now they're trying to make money off of the console, which honestly is kind of them shooting themselves in the foot. Now, at this point, I still think that the Nintendo Switch 2 is going to be a success. Right? It still is. It's unfortunate to say that, but it is, right? It's a recognizable brand. It's from a company that a lot of, outsiders, right? They're just regular old people understand and trust, and they know that if they get little Timmy a Nintendo Switch 2, he'll be happy. Get him Mario Kart 9, he'll be happy. PlayStation and Xbox, they have such more focus on hardcore audiences. But Nintendo is really trying to capitalize on that casual market that they've always done well in, except for the Wii U. Honestly, it's almost like if they looked at the Wii U and thought, you know what, we're never going to cater to the hardcore player ever again. Let's just go and market to the parents of kids and stuff, and also our dedicated fan base. Because their fan base is huge, right? And I'm sure they're going to make enough money off of this initial launch, and it'll be, good news for them, right? I do think that Nintendo, after a while, is going to drop the prices, right? It seems kind of like the Nintendo 3DS in that sense, but not without making their neat little cut. I honestly think that it's a strategy. It's a strategy. They're going to try to, shark as much as possible out of their fan base and people who don't know any better. And then once they drop the price, it'll be seen as something good. Oh, look, Nintendo does care. They're not totally tone deaf. And they're going to make money off of that too, right? Because, again, they're not making money off of hardware sales. They're making money off of software sales. And if they can both charge really high prices for the hardware initially and then lower the prices so that way they can also get a large install base and then make a lot of money off of the software, well, they're going to do that. And that's what I'm predicting. I'm no businessman. I'm just a pissed off customer. And even then, I'm not even a customer because I was thinking of getting into the Nintendo Switch 2 because of a lot of things that they showed initially, a lot of games that look fucking great. Unfortunately, not anymore. I'm honestly thinking of just getting Steam Decks for Christmas for my family and stuff, for cousins and other people in my life instead of recommending them get the Switch 2. And last bit of words, right? I do not condone piracy. Do not, and I am saying do not go looking for any Switch 2 leaks or game ISOs. Do not download Nintendo Switch 2 emulators. Do not get those ISOs and those emulators and share them to me. All right? Don't do that. That is bad. All right? Do not do that. Okay? We respect copyright law around here. But anyways, that's all I have to say about it. A lot of bootlickers in the comment sections, but they're probably bots. Either that or they're just genuine bootlickers, man. Always demand for lower prices. Always try to get the best deal you can. And don't let giant corporations take advantage of you, man. That's all I can say. All right. Have a good one.